So I thought this would be quite an interesting thing to look at. So we're resetting the neck in this it's a John Lott double bass. And we come to a bit of a crossroads where there's a sort of multitude of different options that we could choose. So I thought it'd be interesting to discuss why we've chosen to do what we're going to do, but also what you could have done. And it's one of those things where lots of people have a different idea about the right step forward, and probably not that many of them would be wrong. It's just which one of the options do you go for. So firstly, the necks come out really well from this instrument. Anyone that's taken a neck out can know that you don't know quite what you're going to find underneath. And actually the condition of the block itself is pretty good. So the bass is 190 years old. So the wood is quite brittle in the top block, which is normal. And actually it's fared very well, because I would imagine it's come out several times, and over the course of its life all sorts of things will have happened. So the first thing to look at is the bottom part of the neck here. Interestingly, there's a pin been put in here. Interestingly, that would have been probably to help sight the front when the instrument was made. There's also one little one at the back you can just see. So this has actually come off really well, and is very nice and smooth and flat. So we're going to glue a wedge piece into here, because basically in resetting the neck, the whole reason we're trying to do it is increase the overstand, get the neck a bit further away from the instrument to make it more comfortable to play, also to increase the bridge height a little bit at the same time, again to make it easier to play, because it was it was quite flat. So in doing that, the neck is going to come out and almost do this. So we're obviously going to have to try and get it up a bit at the back. Now the wrong thing to do would be to try and cut it in deeper to get round that. That would change the whole dynamic of everything and actually move all the notes down the bass and make it harder to play. So we're going to glue a wedge in, which was going to help us to basically build up the height without having to monkey about and try and change anything else. Because a lot of, when you're restoring an old instrument like this, they are art, but they're functional art. So they need to be usable and they need to work well for the player, but also you've got to keep the integrity of the instrument and try and do as little as possible to disturb anything. So this is going to go in, quite a handy little tip. We've just got a little nick in this. When you're putting something in like this here, it's actually a really useful way of being able to get it back out again, because it can be quite fiddly. So this is going to go in. So that's a given, and we're going to glue this in with hide glue, as you'd always want to do, into the side here. So that is fitted, ready to go. The next thing we're going to have to do is glue some side pieces in. So the grain of these, you can put it that way, which makes it easier for chopping back in. But actually, for this instrument, we're going to do them that way. It's the correct thing to do. So we've pre-done these. So that's going to fit in there like this. So when we come to glue it in, this is the interesting point here. So basically, during the years, for whatever reason, this block has picked up bits of filler, chunks of wood, white glue, a load of white glue here, and actually some of the white glue's gone into where it's obviously the neck's probably cracked out before. So you sort of had a bit of a crossroads here. So you've got a few options. One is to keep burrowing away, taking out the original wood to try and get under the white glue. So that's an option. Not sure about that. I think probably the correct decision is to try and leave as much as possible there. And then I would use white glue to glue it back onto the white glue, because hide glue will not stick to white glue. So actually this neck, when it came out of the instrument, was glued in with hide glue, and actually it came out really easily. And I think part of that is because the hide glue was sticking to the white glue, which basically meant that there's no glue joint. So you sort of at a decision point where, do we chop everything out and try and get under all of the damage that's been there that's got white glue in it, then pack it back out considerably more than the width of that to correct it, or do you just glue it back in with white glue if somebody else wants to change it later? You've not hurt anything, you've not taken any more original wood out, But your aim for this would always to be on a restoration to use hide glue without question for everything. But when you come up against things like this, it's like, what's the right thing to do? And I don't necessarily think if somebody else said, look, let's chop that right back, that's what they decide to do. I wouldn't necessarily have a massive problem with it. This is just what I would choose to do, or what we as a workshop would, sort of how we would deal with this. So once, basically before that as well, you'll see that there's quite a lot of damage has gone on here. There's a piece of wood there, there's a load of filler. So what we're going to do is we're going to very carefully just take this top layer of this off here, and we're going to basically just put a little couple of mil seat on the top of that, just to give us a nice thing and get rid of a bit of the filler, a bit of the white glue and everything. We'll also, although these look quite long at the moment, and they actually, get them the right way, and they actually protrude from the front of the instrument here, we will actually cut them back to the depth of the block, because obviously the grain of this is running this way. So at the point it's here, it's end grain. So what we're going to do is we're basically going to then put little pieces. It's only going to be a very small, maybe a couple of mil by the time it's done, because we're not actually moving the neck out that far. Basically, we're going to cut this back, and then we're actually going to put pieces of wood the right way, very carefully key them into here. So we've left as much original wood as possible. In fact, we've hardly disturbed anything, we're just adding a piece. We've left as much of the original block as possible. We've been as unintrusive as possible, but yet we've got a very strong joint. Everything is good, and this will be good for years. Now, when it comes to gluing the neck itself in, obviously these are going to sit inside here. Now, I really don't think ever you should glue a neck in a double bass using white glue, because the next person that takes it out, it's a total pain. I don't know, it's unlikely that anybody will want to take the neck out and reset it after we've kind of modernised it now and made it more in keeping with what we'd expect to see today in the overstand and the bridge height. But it is possible. So again, I would never, you'd never want to use white glue for that operation. So after we've glued these back in and we've fitted the neck, it will be gluing glue back in with hide glue. Another option would be, I suppose, probably by far and away the least thing, the only thing I would say in this situation that I would not do under any circumstances, is see all this bit of a mess here and sand or plane this down. It shortens the body stop of the instrument. It will make, when you put the neck back in, all of the notes move down the instrument. If you chop it in further, this I would say absolutely would be the wrong decision to do. And one other interesting point that's worth looking at is that obviously when you reset the neck of the instrument, you end up with it being, just by the thing of you bringing this out, what you're left with at the back is you're going to end up with it continuing to taper. So a useful little trick is, so you don't have to, you sort of don't end up monkeying around with the back here, which has already been monkeyed around with as most basses have of this age. We're basically going to not touch this at all. So it's helped us by the fact we're kicking this up, is going to mean that when this carries on, 10, 12 mil further, it's actually going to reach the button really nicely. But what we will do, we will very slightly flare this new part out to meet this in almost the same position. So by the time you put the shoulders on, your eye won't see it. But what it allows us to do is bring this out without making the button smaller. Okay, so a couple of days have gone by, and we've been sort of finishing this off and getting the neck stuck in. I just thought it was quite interesting to show that although this section of the neck was pretty straight, obviously when you glue a piece on the back and you've got the same button, very often we see that the button's been sort of mutilated a bit or messed around with because someone's reset the neck or done something different and basically got to the back, and the only option was to take the button down. So obviously that's really not what we wanted to do here. So we have, you've really struggled to see it probably on here, but we have very slightly flared this out in here, basically with the piece that's been added on the back, with the grain matched, etc. So obviously that's been stuck on. This is now very slightly flared. As I say, you'll struggle to see it here, but you will see it here. This is very slightly not straight. So what we've actually done, you can actually see where and when you see this done, you will not be able to see it at all, what we've done. But you can see the first part here is flat, and it very slightly flares out there. Obviously it becomes less as you get to the top. I don't want to sort of damage it here, but it gets less as you go to the top. When we actually put it in the bass here, it's actually completely hidden. So when we put the shoulders on, again there'll be a very slight bow in the shoulders, just a tiny bit. But by the time those are on and rounded off and everything, you'll never see that the little sort of the way we've done the piece on the back. Actually, fitting a neck like this is really tricky, and Ian in our workshop is very good at this sort of thing. So you can you'll be able to not see anything. It'll look really like nothing's ever happened. You'll see here that we have basically very nearly finished it. You'll also see it's like a tiny curve that way, but these really small curves, if the line is right, your eye just can't see them. You'll see as well we've just left a little bit here, and basically the very last bit that we do, the very final finish is basically blending this down into the button and blending this smooth. We actually do all that when it's in the bass, just to make sure it really is finished perfectly, where sometimes through experience you can finish something off and then decide, oh, hang on a minute, I wish I'd just changed what I was doing. So it's only a hair really, it's got to come off half a mil, but it just gives you a little bit of lee room just to make sure that when this is back in here, it really is just finished off smoothly and looks nice.